Habits and Health, episode 57.
Welcome to the Habits and Health podcast, where we believe creating healthy habits should be easy. Brought to you by an educator and coach for anyone who wants to create a healthier life. Here's your host, Tony Wynyard.
Welcome to another edition of Habits and Health. My guest today, Teresa Bitner, and she's partners with people who have been knocked down in life and want to bounce back and have a bolder life. She's a coach, a speaker, and an author specializing in resiliency, change, and loss. So we're going to have a conversation with Teresa coming up in just a minute. And if you know anyone who gets some real value from some of the wisdom that Teresa does share with us, please do share the episode with them, and hope you enjoy this week's show. Habits and Health. My guest now is Teresa Bitner. How are you, Teresa?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. And we're taking a trip over to Austin, Texas today.
Yeah, that's right. North of Austin, the suburbs.
And is that where you're from?
No. Originally, I'm from New York. And that's kind of where my journey of change began. I was raised by an alcoholic, abusive parents. They did the best they could. And then moved to North Carolina, where I went to middle school and high school. And then it was the high-tech boom in the 80s. And I came to Austin, Texas. Always wanted to be here. And I've been here since 1989. Not a native, but close.
Wow. And how does Austin compare to New York?
Very different. Very, very different. In some ways it's similar, but it's not, because Austin, we moved here in the 80s because it's a place where you can be and find anything. If you want culture, you can find it. You want cowboy, air quotes, rednecky stuff, you could do that. If you want good school, great barbecue, of course. So Austin affords a lot of that. Lots of people have found that out as well. And it's high tech, and that's my background.
And work-wise now, your business, you have your own business, you work as a coach. Could you give the audience a little bit of a background about what it is you do now and where that came from? What was it that you went through to get to where you are now?
Absolutely. It's a story I like to share, but in some cases, it's not fun to share because some of it was hard stuff to go through. So currently right now, I partner with those who've been knocked down by life and want to bounce back. Sounds kind of simple. And for me, bouncing back looks like recovering or getting through major losses and changes in life, because as humans, we don't like change in general. And some people fight it. So that's kind of my superpower. And how I got the superpower of resiliency and change is the whole alcoholic abusive home. And I was used to changing. We moved. And I really thought I got change. I survived. I was a kiddo, and I really thought I understood grief and death. I had lots of family members die very early in my life, and in high school, friends from accidents and suicides, and then family members as you age were ill from cancer and other things. So I really thought I got it, and I was a survivor, and I would say that was it, and I knew how to handle it. And that was until in 2009, my first husband, Chris, was killed in a motorcycle accident. It was really awful time for us. I had just left a 16-year career in high tech where I was chief breadwinner, large and in charge, I used to like to call myself, and had started a teaching career. I went and got certified to teach middle school science. So we were living out on a 12.5-acre ranch. The boys were freshmen and seniors in high school, so 14 and 17 when that happened. And I was like, oh, wow, now I'm a single mom of two pretty angry teenage dudes, and whoa, I'm a widow of 42. It was just like, what the heck? And it took a long journey. The book that we'll talk about later is kind of my memoir about it, because it was an ugly journey. I went back into some poor habits of eating and drinking my way through grief and trying to figure out what life was, trying to be a teacher, still show up at school, department head, team lead, and all trying to keep it all together. And then sometime through that, I moved from surviving to thriving. And people kept saying, oh, Teresa, you're so strong, you're so resilient. And I'm just like, no, I'm surviving this stuff. Like, wow. But I started researching and getting into what does resiliency mean. And I realized, probably do have that superpower of resiliency and bouncing back. And that's what the memoir is about. After both kiddos, my goal was survive, get both kiddos graduated and onto their adult lives. And I thought, you know what? I have always wanted to start a business. I ended up, and the other thing that got us through that really hard time, I would say, is faith, family, friends, and surrounded by very supportive people. I'm very blessed to have had that. And I know that's a privilege that not everybody has. So I just want to acknowledge that for any listeners. But I decided I had a life coach, and it was like, whoa, this is cool. You can actually get paid to do this. Wow, no way. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to open my own business. And I thought I would be life coaching and consulting. And that's kind of what I do now. But that was in 2014 and didn't sign my teaching contract. And was like, I'm starting my own business. And that's how I got started. And funnily enough, not funnily enough, but as the universe has, as soon as I started my business, my mom started getting ill with congestive heart failure. So here I was, going to be the change and loss coach of the world. And I'm like, really? Thanks, Mom. And I was focusing on divorce, job loss, career changes, which I still do. And then I learned how to be a remote caregiver for my mom as she went from assisted living to hospitals to then hospice and then eventually her death in 2015. And then finding out, oh, Dad's got dementia. We have to put him in memory care. Holy cow, he can't take care of himself. And it was a lot to deal with. Like, oh, I'm starting a business. And, one kiddo joined the Army. The other was getting married. And then I also had a boyfriend and we were getting married, blending families. So all of that life swirl helped. I can look at that now and say helped really round out who I am. And I tell people this because I've been through this. That's why I'm resilient. I keep learning about it. I love to study it, take classes. And I love helping people through their grief and their losses and their changes so that they can become who they want to be and bounce back if that's what they want, move forward, lead their teams through changes, things like that. So that's my deep passion. And I really believe that through education and knowledge and skills, people can build their resiliency. It's like a muscle. If we practice it, we can improve it. So that's a really long answer to your question, but that's the whole story, and you got it all now.
So the thing that comes to mind after you've explained all of that and given that brief description of what's happened over the last few decades, where do you think the resilience came from? What's the earliest memory you have of showing resilience? I mean, did you have it in childhood? Did it come in your 20s, 30s? Where was the first sign? Do you remember?
Ooh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that one. That's a really good one. Let's see. So first, resiliency. And living we were a very functioning home. Dad worked in high tech. Mom was a stay-at-home mom. And it was always, we didn't talk about it. So you always had to be put together and, keep up appearances. What happened in the house late at night was something we didn't talk about. So there was that, you have to do the best that you can. You're smart. Be a good girl. Do the best that you can. It was inbred in me and never lie. Although looking back, there was a lot of denial, not necessarily lies, but denials. And then I would call my teenagers the turbulent teens because I completely rebelled. We moved from New York, where I was Little Miss It, to Charlotte, North Carolina. And oh my God, the debutante, Satan, lived next door because she smoked and drank. So literally had a horrible transition right in the middle of middle school and high school. So I rebelled. And I remember getting in lots of trouble and all kinds of things happened. And Dad just sitting down and he's like, look, you're going to either die or you're going to become really successful. Only you can choose. And I was like, okay, I have that. And there was a very pivotal counselor at school that talked to me about this. He's like, you've got so much going. Don't throw it away. Doing drugs, skipping school, drinking, partying. So that was probably the first time because I really got scared. I got myself in some big trouble and scared myself. And I was like, I have a choice to make. And I can choose to be sober or not sober. And I can choose to live and do these things. And then I really found out about resiliency when I went to college and being one of very few women in 1984 to enter into computer science and engineering and realizing, oh, there's nobody here but me. Wow. And having that I will do this. I will die trying. I will get this degree.
Right. Because there's a number of things that in that description you gave before, there's so many knockbacks that you had. Mm-hmm. Many people would have just given up, started blaming the world, worries me kind of thing. But you didn't take that approach.
I wouldn't say there wasn't blame. For many years, I blamed my parents for my issues. Like they did that to me. I went to an Al-Anon for, children of alcoholics and learned, you have to take responsibility for yourself. Right. That was one of the things I learned was I have to take responsibility for myself, my feelings, and my behaviors. Blame doesn't do anything. But it's really easy to feel that way. Woe is me. Yeah. And I would say when my husband was killed, there was probably a year of woe is me. This sucks. I hate this woman who ran into him. Evil thoughts about how I wanted to hurt her or family. Never acted on them, but just some wallowing occurred. Right. And it took a while to go, okay. And my friends were like, come on. My nickname is TQ. Those are my initials. All right, come on, TQ. You got to get it together. Like I was always Miss It, had it together. I'm like, well, I definitely fell apart. But having that and a strong faith as well.
And so what is there anything you can pinpoint that made a difference that got you out of that funk? What changed? Was it something you read, something someone said?
It was a combination of things because in my book, I talk about the deep, dark abyss that I felt. And I didn't know what depression was. I know a lot more now. And there was a couple pivotal moments. It was me realizing, I'm drinking an awful lot, Friends were bringing me cases of wine. I was drinking them pretty regularly. Not a great thing. Turning into my dad. Ooh, didn't want to do that. And me and the boys there was a lot of chaos and yelling and screaming and slamming of doors. And it's like, okay, I can't do this. This is so not me. I want to be happy. I'm an uplifting, fun person. I can't do this. I had dinner with a set of widows, and one widow had a very similar experience to me. And she was vehement, like, I am taking my daughters to the parole meetings. I'm going to make sure that SOB spends his life, and going on and on. And I was just like, wow. And her kids are only 8 years old. I'm like, ugh. And that was a pivotal moment of like, I don't want to be that. I definitely don't want to be that. The drinking and all this is not helping. And I went to my doctor and said, hey, I blew up at work. I screamed at a colleague really loudly in a middle school, saying all kinds of inappropriate things. My girlfriend was like, girlfriend, you need help. Go to the doctor. And he's like, you have depression and probably anxiety. It's normal after a major loss like that. Mm-hmm. So getting help from the doctor, friends going, get it together, and then realizing I had a choice. I could be not evil, but just bitter, let the death define me and wallow in it, or I can make a change. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make a change.
That's as you were saying that, I had a similar but completely different circumstances, but I had a situation where the role model you kind of described that you didn't want to be, I had that same kind of thing once, and I thought, there's no way I want to be, I won't tell the whole story because it's way too long, but I thought, there's no way I want to be like that. And I used that as like an anti-role model because I never want to be that bitter person. So that can be a really helpful kind of person to not model yourself on, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, it was super surprising because I didn't want to do these widow things because people were very well-meaning. And, join these groups. I'm like, I don't want to hang around with 70, 80-year-old little grannies. I mean, that's nice. They're sweet, but that's not me. So there were very few young women to talk to, because in America there's support for military service people and first responders, but not a lot for the average Jane and Joe. Right. Side note, a gal pal and I have started a widow resource called Torn in Half to just have resources for normal people because it was so hard to find it. There's more now.
And this, I guess, I was going to say so many, but it's almost everyone has some kind of major trauma in their lives at some point, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I truly believe everybody's got a story, and it's what you do. And this is one of the big resiliency skills is like what you do. Like life's going to happen. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to do it alone and getting support. And then what do you do with it? Do you turn it into a story? Do you turn it into art? Do you use it to better the world? That's a big thing for me. It's like, okay, take what I've learned and and this was one of the things when my mom was dying. I just remember hearing the voice of my coaches in my ear. What's the opportunity in this? No matter what, there's always the opportunity. And I'm just like bawling my eyes out, cursing the world at the doctors. And I thought, what's the opportunity? I was like, okay, here's the opportunity. I'm learning about the U.S. elder care. That sucks, but I'm learning something. And I turned, it was a very hard time to take care of your abusers. It's still kind of tricky for me. But my new husband that I'm married to, every time I'd come home, he's like, I don't want you going back there. Every time you come back, you're a wreck. Something's got to change. And I decided I'm going to turn it into a mission field. I'm going to show love to these people because they birthed me. They loved me the best they could. And just that switch of I hate going there, I hate dealing with the doctors, they're mean to me, blah, 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 to, okay, I'm just going to treat it as a mission field. It lets so much of that baloney just roll off.
Yeah. Not holding on to the kind of bitterness that so many people do, which is so unhelpful.
Yeah. And the best tool is to journal it.
Right.
Or some people use art to paint it out, but somehow or another process the yuck out. Because if you hold it and you keep it in your head, it's just going to spin around. Right. So there's, or get professional coaching, therapy, help or something like that, or talk to a spiritual leader if that's helpful.
Right. And talking of coaching, so when was it that you thought, I'd like to help other people with this and started thinking about coaching as a way to move forward?
Interesting, because I realized after I started the coaching school and learning about coaching that I've actually been doing it most of my life because I became a computer science programmer and I started as software development. Hated it. It was good, but it was boring. I quickly wanted to work as a manager and grow people. Didn't know that was called coaching then. So I loved being a manager and a project manager and mentoring other young women in tech. So if you think about that, it's been over 30 years. But and then it was interesting because I left that world and went into education, and I quickly became a coach to new teachers as well. I mean, I was like, oh, I'm only a second-year teacher. They're like, no, you're great. Go coach them. Okay. So, but the real business thing was in 2013. Like, okay, I'm going to do this for a living. I'm going to go get certified. That's a word to the wise out there. Anybody can call themselves a coach. Make sure you pick somebody who's trained and credentialed. That's my personal thing. Because otherwise, you don't know what you're getting. Because I felt it was important to have those skills. So that's when it officially started in 2014.
And is there anything, since you've been coaching people, I mean, you've been doing it for quite a few years now, is there anything about coaching that, I don't know, has really surprised you that you didn't think it would be like this? Is there anything along those lines?
Oh, gosh, there's lots of little things like that. One of them is that I learn and grow through my clients. Like in the coaching world, there's kind of a thing that says you only coach what you need to learn. And it's one of those every time it happens, you're like, ooh, I think to myself, whoa, okay, God, universe, you really paired us together because we are on a trip together. That's been the most surprising thing. And then I think that's the other thing is it's been interesting because I've been doing it long enough and I'm going for the next credential is how much I've grown. And I used to see other coaches, what I thought do amazing coaching and have results like quickly. And I'm now able to do that. I'm like, that's super cool. Like when your client says, wow, that's a good question. Ooh, I never thought about that. It's like, ooh, yes, doing the good work.
So what is it that you feel? I mean, you mentioned just now about you're paired with some people and there's going to be a rule. I'm guessing there's something about you that appeals to, well, the clients that you appeal to. What do you think it is that draws them to you? What issues are they having that you can help them with?
Interesting you should ask that. I'm also mental health certified. So through the pandemic, my business has blossomed, sadly enough, but dealing with workplace anxiety is a big thing. Imposter syndrome is another one that comes up. Career changes, I want to change from this career to that career. Job changes is a big thing I do. The other thing that's interesting is how to deal with the losses and the changes of the pandemic, the losses of freedom. Many clients have had people die on their team or in their family. And then from the pandemic, that kind of, what am I doing on this earth and why am I doing what I do? And is this job/career right, or is there something more? So it spans an interesting dilemma, diversity of people, but I think it's the wondering what's unknown. I want to figure this out, or I want help with my goals, to the really hard grief. I still have lots of grief clients as well. And those are tricky. I won't lie. Just people are always like, Teresa, what do I say? What do I do? I'm like, I might be an expert, but I still don't know.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of the Habits and Health podcast, where we believe creating healthy habits should be easy. If you're looking for the fastest and most effective way to transform your energy and well-being, we invite you to join Tony for an upcoming Habits and Health workshop. This 5-week group workshop will empower you with tools to disrupt unwanted habits and make positive changes easy. You'll enjoy sounder sleep, better energy, less stress, and a happier mood. Workshops begin on the first week of every month, and you can sign up now at tonywynyard.com. Now, back to the show.
So are you saying that in the last 2 years, the issues that you're helping people with have been quite different since before the lockdown?
I don't know that they're different. I don't know if more people are realizing that. Workplace anxiety is huge. That's like performance anxiety is massive, as well as, hey, I'm working from home now, and then they want me to go into the office. I'm scared, or the dynamics have changed. And a lot of people are doing the soul searching of what is going on? Why am I in this world? Hey, wait a minute, you guys are treating me poorly, or you're treating me great, and what matters most to them. I think those are some of the most interesting things that have come on. And then just lots of anxiety, from all different places. Health-wise, is it safe to go out? Is it safe to go to work? Is my performance good enough? I'm introverted. I liked working from home. I hate going back to the office. It's somewhat of a common thing.
I think anxiety is, so many people have had massive amounts of anxiety in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. How is it that you're able to help people with anxiety? What do you think is not so much what is causing them anxiety, but what is the way that you can help people to maybe to have less anxiety? Sure.
And I do want to say that, I'm not a counselor or therapist, so I don't diagnose or prescribe, but there are things you can do for your anxiety. One of the first things is acknowledge it and recognize it. I'm anxious about. I like to draw people into two places. One is, how are you feeling bodily with your anxiety? Like, where do you feel it? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your shoulders? Is it in your feet? And getting people to pay attention to their body and listen for it. I had a really great client experience yesterday. She's like, I never knew. This is where I felt it. Now that I know, I'm like, I can do something. I'm like, yay. Because that's kind of the first, is acknowledging it and finding out where it is. And then also naming the feeling you're having. Right. I feel. And I often ask clients to journal the I feel statements. I feel angry. I feel anxious. I feel sad, mad, whatever. I always like to have folks journal at the end. I feel grateful for, I'm blessed by, I saw Judd today, so they don't end up in the dark place. So those are just a couple of things that the body and emotional awareness first, and then, okay, let's process it out as we're feeling it. And there's all kinds of tools in the toolbox that I have. I like to tell people that.
So are you typically working with people, is it I mean, I know this is a bit like how long is a piece of string, but is it usually like a few months or does it go into years? I mean, what is typical with most of your clients?
I wish I could say there's a typical, it depends. Some people are just a few sessions,
Right.
a handful, a month or two. I have many clients that I'm on, years 2 and 3. I would say most clients are about 6 months to a year.
Right.
And then they may come back for what we call a tune-up, or some
Right.
people have me on retainer and like, hey, hey, I want to talk to you. It's been a month. Oh my gosh, I'm not working out again. Look at me. I feel bad. That's okay.
So anyone who's listening to this now, and what kind of issues might they be having that would be maybe they would be worthwhile contacting you? What kind of people do you tend to work with?
Those that want to have help and want to do the work. Coaching is work. It's so many well-meaning friends and family are like, oh, so-and-so needs to see you. I'm like, okay, do they want to coach? Do they want to do something? Right. So, and I think if you're realizing I'm in this place of, anxiety, grief, I'm lost, I'm stuck, and especially with the grieving folks, have you, done some therapy and counseling could be super helpful. And then you kind of pop your head up and you're like, I just can't. I don't know why. I set these great goals. I'm not getting them done. So many clients come with that, like, I know how to do this. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not doing it. And that's a great time to partner with a coach. I even keep a coach on my bench. I keep coaches so I can get things done because we're human and we have great intentions and my goals are over here all pretty, but you have some accountability there that can be really helpful. And if you're stuck, let's do a little deep dive and figure out why you're stuck. Get past that.
I always think that if a coach doesn't have a coach, that's what are they saying about coaching?
That's a good one, Tony. You're smart. Yes, indeed. Well, and it's funny because I went through a very intensive training program and didn't have a coach for a while, and then I hired one. And I was like, man, okay, why did I let that go? So much, because I get so much more done and so many more things are happening.
And it's impossible for us to see ourselves where someone else is able to give us a very different perspective than what we have of ourselves.
And that's a wonderful thing about coaching. I like to hold my hand up and say, hey, this is you. This is awesome you. We're going to clean it out. And then you can see you and do the great things that you were brought on this earth to do.
And on that, do you think is one of the biggest issues most people have is the negative self-talk and the lack of self-compassion? Is that a big issue that you face a lot?
Absolutely. With the favorite book we'll talk about, it's the idea of what we were told about ourselves and unwinding that negative self-talk and the negative beliefs that you might have or limiting beliefs that you have about yourself. Yeah. I mean, because a lot of it is you're your best ally and you're your best saboteur.
And so when did you write the book?
I wrote the book the book started. So the funny thing about the book, anybody who wants to write a book, you can. Never thought I was going to do that. The book came from my Facebook post after my husband died. Is kind of how I got the timeline, because my friends and family are spread out all over the world, and they're like, put on Facebook every day. That way we know you're alive and you didn't off yourself or do anything to the kids. I'm like, okay, fine. So I did that. So I started writing the book probably 2 years after Chris was killed, but that I couldn't write much, so I stopped. And every time I put the book down, somebody would ask me to tell my story and then tell me, oh my gosh, you need to write a book about this. I was just like, no, I don't want to write a book. And it just became more and more like this finger was pointing down from on high. Write the book, Teresa, write the book. Oh my God, just get the book done. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I took some time, joined, thought I had a great manuscript, and in a mastermind group of other coaches, this great coach said, hey, have you ever heard of the Texas League of Writers? No. Maybe you should take a class. So I took a class on how to write. Computer scientists do not know how to write. I was like, oh, I'm eating crayons, and there's like a New York Times bestseller here. Wow. So I took some classes, and that's how it started, and I joined a writing critique group to help me with my writing, and it took about 2.5 years to birth it, and then an editor to help me take it the rest of the way.
And on that process, can you remember So when you first actually, you had all those people saying, "Oh, you need to write a book," and you were resistant to that initially. Once you decided, right, I'm going to write a book. Can you remember what your intentions were for the book then? And then when you actually wrote the book, when it came to actually, the finished edit, how much had your intentions changed in that period?
That's a fascinating question. You ask really good questions. So my intention for the book was just to get the story out. I figured the story could help others. I thought maybe it would help me in my coaching business and I would use it with clients. That was kind of the initial thing. By the time I finished the book, I had no idea my own therapeutic process that I went through. It was gut-wrenching, horrible. I almost stopped many times. I had some mean people say mean things about the book. Had a great coach colleague say, I'm tired of hearing you whine about the book. Just shut up and write the blankety blank book or, stop talking about it. I was like, oh. So I had, write the blankety blank book up on my just write. And that's a great thing I would love to tell everybody. It's just write. You don't have to publish it. You just write. If you get a story, write it. It's a beautiful thing. We found a story that my husband Bill's mom wrote, and it's, on typewriter paper. And it's a legacy she has because she's no longer with us. I never got to meet her, so I could meet her that way.
Right. And did you have a particular sort of type of person in mind as you were writing the book?
It would be a person who, and it's actually grown since Soul Love, the book, has its own life. I kind of once I birthed it and I'm like, okay, God, take it, do whatever you're going to do with it. And it has its own life. And it's been a balm to those who are grieving. And it's also been a balm because it's Soul Love, how a dog taught me to breathe again. Also to dog lovers and animal lovers who have what they believe is a spirit animal that's because this dog tells all the yucky stuff. And he was like my therapy dog, not officially, but I swear to it's okay, you're like some weird angel dog on earth.
And what type of dog is it?
He was a Doberman, and I got him because we lived on a ranch. I needed something to protect me, and I thought he would do it. Plus, I always wanted a Doberman, and my husband Chris didn't want one. I'm like, I'm going to get a Doberman. Whoa. He was the biggest wiener. He was such a sissy. Sounded good, looked good, like a scary dog, but if you came up to him, he'd pee himself. It was fun.
So when the book was when was the book released?
It was released in 2018.
And what was the reaction like? Was there any reactions that surprised you at all?
Most people were really like, oh, hey, great. Thank you, and supported me and had a book launch and all of that. There's some people who didn't like it. And I'm sure thought I did that for my own, grandiose for my business. And, oh, how dare you make money off of that? But it was like, no, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to tell the story.
Right.
And plus, trust me, I think I broke even, maybe because I self-published, but boy, howdy. No, you don't make a lot of money writing books. I knew that.
But have there been people reached out to you that's really helped them?
Oh, yeah. I still get emails. I was really surprised because it's Amazon I got 4.7 stars and people, at first it was all my friends and family. Of course, they're going to write nice things, but then people around in the industry started writing reviews. That was surprising. And then the emails I get for people, who've been through losses, not necessarily a death or an animal loss, how it's helped them, dog lovers, how they're like, oh yes, this is a story that needs to be told. I've had other people who they've watched their friends go through grief and didn't understand it. And that's the other thing about the book. I told it in a real raw, visceral, kind of New York out there way so people could see what grief really looks like. Right. One of the most profound things that happened is I was in a writing group with a pastor, and he'd been a pastor for years. He's like, oh my gosh, Teresa, I have been such an idiot. I haven't been there for the widows. I'm like, well, you didn't know. And until you go through it, you don't know. And also, they're not going to come out and tell you. We're all embarrassed by how ugly it gets. And also the other purpose is to normalize the grief conversation, because it's not if, it's when we're going to die. In the Western world, for whatever reason, we call it passing. They've left us. I would just want to say, no, they died. We need to use the word dying and death. It's part of life. It can be beautiful.
It's so difficult for most people to speak about death, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah.
Are you familiar with the death cafes?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, there used to be one in Austin. I don't know if they're still there. And in the UK, you guys have some really great resources available as well. You're opening up, and it's starting to open up more in the US, but it's a funky culture thing. I mean, and the other thing I tell people is like, oh my gosh, we had all our affairs in order. We had the papers, the wills, all that stuff. It made a horrible situation easier. I can't imagine having it not done. If you don't have that, holy cow, please do that for your family.
What do you think is I don't know. I was going to say what is the hardest thing to deal with about death, but I mean that's so many different angles that you can. What comes to mind when I say that?
I think when you're the widow or widower or the one dealing with the estate, the amount of flipping paperwork and phone calls, and I think it's universal. I don't know anybody that I've talked to. It's just you make this giant list of things you have to do, and then the mail starts piling up or the bills start piling up. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I have to make another phone call. Or, I sent the death certificate in 37 times and they still haven't stopped, processing X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. That's super hard. And the mail that just keeps coming. Oh my gosh. Like I still get mail for Chris. I'm like, okay, we're on year 13 and I've moved and I've changed my name and I've been married. What the hey? Like there's nothing in his name, but he still gets mail, as my mom does. I'm like, awesome, go mom.
So it sounds like that you've been in touch with many people who've experienced grief and death and so on. So from all the experience that you've kind of accumulated, would you say what are the best ways maybe of dealing with death and the worst things, like maybe just one or two things that help it and that really kind of make it much worse?
I think making it worse would be not getting help or trying to stuff it. If you stuff it, it will leak out, and pretend that everything's okay. The other thing is over busyness. Our Western world is very much like, oh, I'm just going to workaholic myself to death. Easy way of coping, but it can become an addiction. Right. Those are the unhelpful things. And also addictions pop up in that. The most helpful is learning about the death process. What does it look like? What does it mean to grieve? Getting help, support with someone, joining a group, and not going it alone, I think are the biggest things to do for grief. And talk to your loved ones about the expectations so that if it happens, how to deal with it so you don't have all that unknown and the yuck and the financial pressures. Because it doesn't have to be horrible. I mean, it will be horrible, but it doesn't have to be financially ruining or anything like that.
So we touched upon your book just now, and it made me wonder if you've got any ideas about a follow-up.
I do. Yes, I am writing it. It is called Elder Care Nightmare, Mission of Love. This is a book that people keep telling me to write, and I keep getting calls on, hey, Teresa, I know you've dealt with blah, blah, blah. So it's about my mission dealing with my parents from the start to the end. Oof. And it's not easy to write about. And my dad's 93 and still living, Cadillac, and broke his hip during COVID, had COVID. He's just fine. Doesn't know who anybody is, but he's Cadillacing.
So when do you think that might be finished?
Well, I'd hoped this year would be a great part of it getting finished, and I'm chunking out chapters much faster than I had. So we'll see. 2023, almost definitely, but not for sure. But the chapters are coming, and they're coming easier. I had started writing it, and then I put it down. Like many writers, you start, and you're like, I can't do that anymore. Just the whole dad thing got really crazy there for a while.
And will that be self-published again, or will you go a different route?
I'm probably going to self-publish again. I'm toying with the idea of getting an agent and all of that. For me, it's more important to get the story out. Right. And I also kind of, I'm a recovering control freak. So when you go with an agency, you lose control. Like I self-publish, I can update it. Oops, I got a spelling error. I can update it.
Right. And speaking of books, there's, I believe there's a book that's really kind of moved you in your past. Mm-hmm. What was that? What book was that?
That book is The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Oh, my goodness. And there's a 5th agreement by his son, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., who I've also actually met in person. Oh, my gosh. But that book, it was funny because when Bill and I started dating, he's like, you have to read this. I was like, okay. So he started reading it out loud to me. And this is where we knew another affirmation that Hans the Doberman was different. He would sit like he was, and he wouldn't sit on the couch with us. He would sit in front and stare at Bill while Bill read it to me like he was absorbing it. And Bill was like, your dog is weird. I'm like, he's learning. He's got his next job to do. I don't know. So, and the 4 agreements have changed my life, and I recommend it to almost all of my clients.
What was it about the book? I mean, is there any one thing that you can think that really that made it different from all the other books that you've read?
The lessons about not taking things personally, right, and don't make assumptions, and the whole concept of the stories we tell. For me, that was like one of those brain chunks. Like, I got it. Like, oh, this is why people act this way. This is why mom might say this or so and so, and not realizing that, hey, that's your story. It's okay. I don't have to take your junk and put it on me. It's okay, or I can be sad for you. It was totally liberating.
And I'm guessing that many of the things that he said, you'd probably come across before, but it was the way that it was put across in that book that was maybe spoke to you more?
I think so. And I always tell my clients, it's a little woo-woo from what you would think from Teresa, but it looks at things in such a different way, and it makes so much sense. And it's very personal. And both Don Miguel Sr. and Jr. and the brothers have all written different books, and they're so good. They're just, if you want to come up with self-mastery or anything like that, they're just so good.
So if people want to find out more about you, your website, social media, your books and so on, where should they look?
You can find me social media. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Just look up Teresa Bitner. And then my website is boldfulfilledlifecoach.com. Very long name. The book, I can hold it up here. I don't know if you do video or not, but here's the book. So the book is Soul Love, How a Dog Taught Me to Breathe Again. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. It's in Kindle, hardbook, paperback. And you could go to my website if you wanted a signed copy. I'd be happy to mail it to you. You guys in the UK will have to work on the how we do that shipping. But hey, I know how to do that.
And finally, Teresa, is there a quotation that you like?
Lots of different quotes came to mind when you asked that question in your email. But I think the quote I want to leave people with is one that I came up with, is you don't have to do this alone.
And why is it that one?
We can grow and learn and move past our stuckness, our lostness, or grief when we're with other people. And humans are made for relations. That's why the pandemic and being solo is so hard. Find someone, find a group, find supportive people, and don't do it alone. They're out there.
Teresa, thank you for everything you just shared. And best of luck for the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Great thinking questions too.
Thank you. Next week, episode 58 with Polly Bateman. This is an amazing episode. I found it very difficult to stop recording because Polly just gave so much great information. Her bio says she's a straight-talking, empathetic and disarmingly humorous mindset and performance mentor. Polly Bateman wants to disrupt your beliefs and break through the self-imposed barriers that limit your potential. And it was all around mindset. And she just came out with some great answers to the questions I was asking her. And there's definitely going to be a part 2 to this episode because there was so many things that she said that there was just many different questions I wanted to fire at her in the responses that she was giving me. So this is next week, episode 58 with Polly Bateman. If you enjoyed this week's episode with Teresa Bitner, please do share the episode with anyone who you feel would get some real value from it. And I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Habits and Health Podcast, where we believe creating healthy habits should be easy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Sign up for email updates and learn about coaching and workshop opportunities at tonywinyard.com. See you next time on the Habits and Health Podcast.